Hey, everybody. Give everybody a second to roll in here for my participants in action. Share my screen. There we go. I'll speak to the ghost voice in the back. Crystal, can you share my screen okay?
Let me check real quick. Yeah, I think we're good.
Sweet. All right. We started it kind of a little bit late, not too late, so I won't do the usual preamble of waiting for people to roll in because I think we're good. Welcome, guys. If this is your first Service AI webinar, great, because we're going to kind of be covering top to bottom, what it does, how it works, the logic behind it, even where it's going to go. If you've seen one of these before, if you've seen a specific thing on maybe just triage, maybe just technician assistance, this one's going to be more high level for peeps that just kind of want to see the bigger picture. So shouldn't be anything you haven't already seen, just fair warning in case you're like, I wonder what this guy's talking about. But for those of you that don't know or that are joining us for the first time, again, welcome. I'm Ricky Cecchini. I'm the VP of Product at CloudRadial. And yes, we're talking about ServiceAI, which is one of our products in our product line. And specifically, we're going to be looking at a couple of different features, how they feed in together, and what the whole deal is with ServiceAI. So definitely going to talk about ticket triage and then the gist of it, tech insights and responses. And I'll get it out of the way. Ticket triage is something that is currently available only for Autotask and ConnectWise PSAs. There are more coming, more support for more of those. But again, I'll keep it generic because a lot of the other stuff, two-thirds of this webinar applies to anybody. There's no preferential treatment on those. So let's get started. Again, like I said, I'm going to keep this one a little bit more high level than the other ones I've done in the past for Service AI. So we're covering, again, the top level of how it works, kind of the methodology, the ingestion, the just how we build it and how what we really mean by AI stuff, right? Because that term gets thrown around a lot across all kinds of industries and products. So we're going to look at specifically how we are leveraging AI for service, looking at ticket triage, looking at the RPS foundation. So basically relative performance scores and what we're trying to do instead of just saying, let AI run wild. And then we're going to look at resolutions and what those mean and how those kind of come together. So we're really touching on kind of all of the bigger benefits and the bigger purposes of Service AI. Don't worry, I only have like 5 slides and I hate slides, so I go pretty quick off these if you've never seen me do this. So if you've never seen it, again, what we kind of package it as is an intelligence platform, and its real purpose is to try to take your existing tickets that you've got in your PSA or ticketing system, ingest them, build a database off of them, and then start to make actionable things from those things. So a couple of those actions can be trying to take your documentation and your answers from your tickets, get them the same way that you might do with a ChatGPT or a Claude or whatever, giving it a context, giving it a head start on that context. So then, if a technician were to ask questions about, hey, how do I do this? It's using your existing knowledge. Now, even bigger than that, the goal for Service AI was and still is to try to take that and basically give you a readiness of how is AI going to behave if you let it loose using your data. Now, a lot of the stuff I'll show you, most of the stuff is going to be intended really just for you guys internally, service desk wise. So you're going to see how it falls in as far as a internal optics tool to see, again, what AI estimates your readiness is for actual client deployment. But then you're also going to see how it can be useful today and you're not just kind of chasing an endless target. Again, if you've never seen it before, it'll make more sense when we actually look at the product and how it works. But this is the model that is fundamental to it. So you've got Service AI, which is the platform that we're going to be looking at. And with anything AI, really, it's about what it knows, right? The context that it's given, that it understands, that it has in its brain is basically the usefulness of it. And you'll see this, we've talked about it, others talk about it. It very much is the system of garbage in, garbage out. So if you have something that is pretty bad and you're feeding it kind of crap, it's going to spit out crap and you're not going to find it very useful. But this thing will help you identify it. And it's going to ingest specifically your tickets. That's the primary source. Definitely your articles. So if you have documentation, we want to ingest that as well to give it further context. And then this is not something you can bring to the table, but there are rules as well. So you can kind of tailor your AI to behave in certain ways that you find most helpful, right? Speak a certain way or present information a certain way or think a certain way. And we'll look at that as well. That's the inputs. The outputs is it'll give you insights because again, AI is much better than a human being in terms of being able to process hundreds or thousands of tickets and kind of recall those instantly. And it'll draw insights across those, and we'll look at some of those reports. And it'll also be able to output, again, what we call the chat sandbox, which is really how those technicians are bouncing answers off of it. And again, it's using the food you give it, all the data to give those outputs. And we'll talk about how to tweak those and kind of the meta game of it too. And then we'll also talk about if you could do everything right and you're feeling like you're really good at it, what's the output? Like, do you just use it as a tool to report on and use it for your technicians? Well, we also have the discussion of how you take that to the client, right? With CloudRadial chat, or just in general, we'll talk about the future of it. So this is kind of in a nutshell, what you feed it and what it spits out generally. Um, Oop, I really blew past this. We'll talk about this kind of in the nature of just discussing service AI, but a lot of times when you think about how to approach it, and this is something that, again, if you're either familiar with AI or not, and you just want a very, very loose general guideline of how to approach stuff with AI, this is the way to do it. It's the way we approach service AI. It's the way really any AI tool should be done, which is first things first, you feed it and you analyze and you just see where it's at. Then you test it and improve it and train it, right? We can talk about whether you need to feed it better stuff, whether you need to, you're happy with what you fed it and you need to keep tweaking how it's outputting stuff. So that's kind of the testing. And then deployment, right? Which is how do you then like you got this brand new shiny AI tool that now knows and is not saying stupid stuff. How do you use that, right? Do you just again let it sit, or do you weaponize it in some way that's cool? Talk about that. So that's it for the PowerPoint. Again, I hate PowerPoints. I prefer to just talk. So if you want to get a demo of it, radials.io/demo. If you want to keep chatting, if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. And I'll try to go high level, kind of quickish. As you can tell, I talk pretty fast. So I'll try to leave some room for questions and whatnot. But again, I really want to get through some of the demo stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on, where do I want to start? I think I want to start on this guy. Again, I had mentioned that I've done this webinar a couple different times because sometimes I do webinars specifically on one of the features and we do a real deep dive into it. This one being a more high level one, I'm going to cover kind of the basics. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning, Service AI fundamentally starts off by just having nothing in it because it's looking for you to feed it before it gives you any output. So what do we do? Well, I have a couple of different tabs open. Specifically, I did this one because I usually in my typical demo, which I will go to, I'm connected to ConnectWise and people are like, cool, it works with ConnectWise. What else? So just for a flavor's sake, I pulled up an Autotask one to show how that works. And this is it. And I'll swap back and forth to show you that there's really not much of a difference because fundamentally it works the same way. So at a very, very high level, first things first is we're going to feed it, right? So again, in my specific case in this one, I've got it pulling in from Autotask. We do Autotask, we do ConnectWise, we do Halo PSA, Kaseya BMS, Synchro, even Zendesk. Maybe more in the future, but those are the ones that we primarily support, like as a product family with CloudRadial. So that's kind of what we're in here. And the idea, and this is just to get your mind kind of thinking, is that you, depending on obviously what PSA you have, you hook it up and then you tell it where to pull information from, where to learn from, where to feed on. So in this case, I'm only pulling it from one queue in Autotask, my triage queue. That's about it, right? We're not going to cover all of the super nitty-gritty of the stuff. It's just to say we're pulling in that stuff. So what Service AI is then doing is it goes, got it. You want me to learn from triage. Best practice is to pick queues or if you can, boards queues, any kind of restrictions that have the best client interaction because the goal is, again, to give the AI as much context as possible. Now, even for my technical folk out there, what we're doing is we're building a database. We're basically copying over the tickets into a database in Service AI. It's isolated. We're not learning from it, where there's no piping your data up to a mastermind that's doing any of that stuff. Nope, you get your own little database. And then the AI is basically just running and looking and understanding all of your stuff holistically, right? So we're really using your fuel and then we're putting the AI on top of it. So then what do you do with it? Well, you can feed it, right? In this case, I did. And then you can also backsync it, which is another huge part of Service AI, which is how much context do you want to give it? And in this case, I don't have all that much. I've given it a month's worth of context, but a lot of times MSPs will give it a year, 6 months, 2 years, whatever. And what that's going to do is it's going to train the AI and basically give it all the history and understanding of all of the stuff you've done in the past. And that's going to both dramatically improve the answers it gives because it has more juice, basically. And it's also going to give you better reporting, which we'll cover as well. But before we talk about those two, because those are really the bread and butter of Service AI, is most of the time assisting technicians to get answers that to questions they've probably asked a million times and have been answered before, which again, the answers are going to be in older tickets and or documentation. That's one big use case. And then the other one is to get an idea of the service desk. But I'm going to start on triage because triage is kind of a weird one that kind of exists as a tertiary use for Service AI, but still very useful. And again, this is Autotask and ConnectWise for now. So if it's not you, zone out for a second. We'll come back to everybody else's work. So I pulled up Autotask, and what we're doing with triage is relatively simple. We're basically just turning on this power to basically assist with AI on a dispatch level. And when I turn it on, right, you can see my settings here, and I'm going to walk through how this actually works. You enable it, and really simply, the only thing that I really want you guys focusing on screen is what you're asking it to monitor. So you can point it to a queue or a board if you're ConnectWise or multiple, and basically say, watch these, and then do your best at picking the new title, a type and subtype, an item, a priority, all that stuff. The purpose is at a grander scale, like there's a lot of tools that do this, but the reality is that we want that stuff being done because the better the information comes into the platform and we kind of understand it and learn from it, the more useful it's going to be for reporting, for answering, and again, you'll see what that means. So even a practical example before I show how it works is if I get a ticket into, in this case, my triage queue from a user that just says, please help, my printer's broken, something super generic that a real user might do. Service AI is not going to be very helpful, not because it's not helpful in whole, but what does it have to go on? It has to go on a subject that says help. It has to go off a printer issue. It's going to suggest that you basically ask the user what their issue is with the printer. You don't need AI to do that. I can do that for you. You can call me anytime. I'll tell you to do that. So that's why it's kind of like, eh. Same thing with like the reporting, right? If you look at reporting, and this is the problem historically with PSAs are getting better. I want to do a disclaimer that I've seen tremendous growth out of every PSA out there. But historically, a PSA, when it does reporting, is typically reporting on the strict stuff like the categories and the subtypes or whatever, which means that if you're trying to get really insightful service desk analytics, whether it's across your entire service desk, whether it's across a specific client, a lot of times what you'll see is reports come back going like, hey, you had 50 hardware tickets and 20 software tickets and 15 security tickets and 800 must change or whatever's, meaning that nobody changed the type. So it gets kind of muddy. Now, triage is cool because again, it does the dispatching job of at least cleaning up the ticket, but it has the added benefit of giving better context so the AI can help give better answers, which we'll look at, and also just helps clean up reporting. So it's not just, let me just rewrite the subject because it's fun, but there's a bigger purpose. So let's look at how that works in action. And again, I've gotten requests to show this in Autotask, so let's do that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you that I have my Autotask pulled up, and sure enough, tickets will show up here, obviously, as a PSA does. Now, the way that ServiceAI works is as soon as a ticket hits whatever board or queue that you've specified, it's going to get a webhook from the PSA, giving us the information of the ticket and then available options that it could have. And what the AI is going to do, so without you having to tell it anything off the bat, it'll just make its best guess as to what stuff should be. So kind of like if you were to put a human being on it, telling them nothing and going, make your best guess. So if I see, I don't know, an issue about the network being down, and then I see in the type that you have network and then you have outage as a subtype, for example, as a human, I'd go, that makes sense. I'm going to do that. AI is basically tasked with the same thing. Here's a big list of options. What do you think makes the most sense? And it does it. And we'll talk about it, but you can also see from looking over my shoulder here that you have corrections you can make, which is a big part of it. And we're not going to talk about triage for too long because I do want to cover everything, but a lot of the other webinars I've done, especially ones on triage specifically, talk about mastering these connections and tweaking it. But you can see that you can route it to certain places, you can assign it to people. And again, you can change the categorization to say, like, hey, network tickets are always highest priority and stuff. But getting a little ahead of myself. That's the gist what triage does. Now, what tickets are triaged? Well, anything that hits that queue is going to get kind of cleaned up. So instead of just putting a ticket on here, I could do it and it would do it, logging it directly from Autotask. I like to give the example trying to show you that it doesn't really matter what medium a user uses to get that ticket on there. As long as it hits that queue or board, it's going to get cleaned up, dispatched, triaged. So I take this time to kind of plug and also show how our MSPs are using it that use our client portal, separate product, right? But still, think about whether a client emails in or uses a chat bot or uses a portal. It doesn't really matter. So in this case, I'm a user in a portal. I made a really, really stupid, simple ticket that just says, hey, I want to select an issue category, let's say with my files. And I'm going to say, like, I'm locked out of editing my files. It says, please enter a BitLocker key. Uh-oh. What does that mean? So here's a user logging in a ticket. Now, what we're going to see, I'm going to do this pretty quick. So if you're listening, I always say this, you have to kind of watch the screen because it goes really fast. What's going to happen is, as a user, I'm going to submit this ticket. Then I'm going to switch to Autotask, and you're going to see that the ticket's going to make it there exactly as I logged it. And then after that, you're going to see that ServiceAI probably has anywhere from a 10 to a 30-second window where it's going to apply all the changes it thinks should be made. You'll see that in a flash. So here comes the user saying, that's my issue. We're going to watch for a ticket number being submitted down here. There we go. I'm going to go to Autotask. We're going to see that ticket and we're going to open it up. Now, the ticket title is exceptionally useless, right? It literally says help. So the title is help. It has my issue and everything else. It says, please enter a BitLocker key, and that's it. So the ticket has made it very unremarkable. No information has been entered in it whatsoever. Perfect. Now I'm pretty sure if I refresh it's already changed, but I'll show you what's happening very quickly inside of Service AI. So because we have the triage working, and usually when I actually do implementations or I discuss this with MSPs, is I'll encourage them to run it in test mode, which I currently have off. That's how it launches by default, which means that triage is not going to do what I'm showing right now. It's not going to willy-nilly just start changing your information. Test mode lets you kind of flavor check like what its decisions are without touching the ticket first. So you have a running log, which we're about to look at, just to get an idea of how it works. And if you dislike stuff, you can make tweaks before it really goes crazy on it. But we'll come back to test mode again. I have it off, so mine's actually going to make changes. I'm going to go, because this is the triage setup area, I'm going to go to the triage section. And what you're going to see when I set this to all time is I should have my ticket come in right there. There it is. Now, when I click on it, we're going to see that log of decisions and whatnot. So it received the ticket, the original subject being a very stupid and unhelpful help. And it says lockout issue with a BitLocker key. Okay. So generally speaking, what it's going to do is it's going to check for spam. If it's spam or it decides it's spam, it can punt it off to a spam queue or board. And if it's you don't have one of those, in that case, I actually do, it'll just stop processing the ticket because we don't want to waste your time just renaming spam alerts. So in this case, it seems good. The user was found, the company exists, seems legit. I didn't have any routing rules. It's not a duplicate. So now you're going to see that what it did was it went, hey, locked out of files. This is the basically the before and after changes. So it goes, okay, we're going to change the title to that. We're going to change it to a standard category. It's other because I don't really have much in my own testing. Raise the priority to high, probably because it understands it's a security thing. And then estimated time, it kind of guesses some time. I always say this on every webinar. AI has no real concept of time stuff. You can teach it and train it, but for the most part, it'll just be like, I don't know, 2 hours? Who knows? There goes, didn't know it. And it took from start to finish, from assignment to changes, 19 seconds, right? And it gives you like a little field saying of what it actually changed. So did that actually happen? Well, I'm going to go back to Autotask and I'm going to refresh it. And then you're going to see that the stuff, sure enough, did change, right? When we click on it, it did make the changes. It did change the priority. It did apply things that need to happen. And that's an example of it going off and working. Fundamentally, whether you're using ConnectWise or Autotask, that's the gist. So when we get into why you might need to do changes or test mode is you might go, no, 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 that's the wrong subcategory. Or maybe you go create some to better help it. Or maybe you hate the idea of it touching the priority. Or maybe you like the priority, right? You maybe think that this should be a super urgent critical because it used the word BitLocker. These are all the nuances of what you can do when you get into it. Now, I've done basically none of that. You can see that it's pretty decent just off of the jump. But if you want to get into it further and further, this is where you would come in here and kind of do your edits. And a lot of times the edits in Service AI are super simple because these are prompts. So you can come in here and literally say something like, if it's anything related to seemingly security, immediate, urgent, or whatever. Or for assignment rules, you can say, hey, assign it to David, our security guy, if it seems related to security. You don't have to do the nitty-gritty mapping. You can kind of let it naturalistically pick. And then there's other cool stuff in here, like again, priority alert keywords can automatically bump the priority if a certain keyword happens. So you don't have to teach it rules necessarily. And that's the gist. There's not a whole lot to triage, and it's a relatively simple thing. And we like to show it, especially during webinars and just discussions, because it's a quick way to start getting some value out of the tool while you're waiting for the other bigger strategy AI stuff to kind of come together. Um, Again, you can ignore tickets. Obviously, you don't want it wasting time trying to triage and touch tickets that are coming from like your Huntress or backup tools or whatever. That's it, right? So fairly simple. You can tweak it if you like to, and that puts us in a really good state where tickets come in. If you don't have a tool, right, or a PSA that is one of those two that does the triage, again, not a big deal. This is not the primary purpose of Service AI. It's just a little bonus you get if you have those two that we can get working pretty well. That's all there is to it. Now, I'm going to swap back to my other PSA just because I have more fake data and it kind of presents a little bit nicer. This one's ConnectWise, doesn't really matter. And the only difference is if you don't have ConnectWise or Autotask, when you try to go to triage, it'll just be like, hey, we don't have anything for that yet. Sorry. But other than that, the rest of the stuff is fair game. So, rest of my PSA people, you can hone in now. Okay, so we've got back to the discussion, right? We've got the tickets loaded in. We've got kind of this database built of stuff. We've maybe, depending on if you've got the PSA, you got triage helping out with dispatching tickets and kind of doing that like, quick help. Now, what are we doing with Service AI as a whole? Well, this is the very first thing you're going to get hit with when you first load up tickets. I only have 284 actual clients that are using Service AI right now, typically backsync in anywhere from like a couple thousand, like, 1,000, 2,000, whatever. I think my top dog right now is 180,000 tickets. So it's like it can get pretty big. Keep in mind, again, this is not a best practices webinar, but you don't want necessarily all of those tickets because what's going to happen is AI. It's again pretty similar to a human. If I tell you one rule, you're going to remember it pretty well. If I gave you 800 rules, you might start stepping on your own toes trying to figure out which rule precedes the other. And rules in this case are more so like tickets. If I changed exactly how I handle a ticket process 7 years ago, 3 years ago, like last year, AI is not going to know that. It's just going to see that you have four different, five different, 25 different ways of handling a ticket. And it's just going to be more confused. So for demo's sake, for best practices sake, I always kind of encourage a shorter, cleaner window of time because you just want to give it the best going forward because that's what it's going to use as a template. Now, why do I give you that preamble? Because when we first come in, let me do my all-time data, you're going to get hit with scores right in your face. And this is super important. I take every webinar on Service AI to talk about these because this is the real, I would say, differentiator between CloudRadial's AI tool versus pretty much anything else. What we are focused on and obsessed with, again, remember I mentioned kind of the North Star, the big goal, is trying to figure out if you as a company are ready for AI. And when I say ready for AI, the real goal that a lot of MSPs want is, can I have this thing basically helping out, answering tickets, maybe even making its way in front of clients, or is it going to embarrass me? Does it suck? Is it stupid? Is it giving wrong answers? All that stuff is a really fine line between something really cool and powerful and hype and something that'll blow up in your face. So why the scores? Well, even in this case, of my 284 tickets, what I'm basically seeing is a representation of my readiness. So RPS, standing for Relative Performance Score, is basically a value that'll tell you on a scale of 1 to 10 how you're looking in a certain category, and it has different ramifications. Tickets is a super important one because what's happening is when we bring in your tickets and we process them, the AI is going through and understanding how your performance is on that ticket. Now, specifically, what that means is it looks at the conversation between the technician and the end user, and it tries to understand if it knows the issue, if the conversation went well, if the technical details were spilled, and if that's the case and it really gets the conversation, that's a really high score. If it's a ticket that's like, I need help, and then the technician comes and says, no problem, and then that ticket gets closed, just like a human being would, the AI goes, I have no idea what happened here. It's not implying, even a low ticket RPS does not imply that the ticket went poorly or that you should be pissed. It just means that that is crappy food. You fed it something that it does not really have any reason to use. This is why when we talk about hygiene, again, this is a whole different webinar, we want to try to feed it initially the best possible food up front because if you feed it RMM tickets and security tickets that are usually just the same stuff and then techs either don't say anything or they just close it, what's going to happen is the AI is going to go crappy food, 1, 2 out of 10, and you're going to start polluting your scores, not being able to really tell how AI is going to be able to use your stuff. So not only is it going to get confused, but you're going to get poor scores. So it kind of pays to be mindful of what exactly you're letting it learn from. Now, in this case, we're past that. I've get it. I've got it looking at a board or two that are for sure client facing, and it's given me a 6.4, and we're going to look at why. Again, that's the quality of the interactions, the tickets that I've given it. So not too bad. This is a good indicator telling me that I probably want to double check myself before I put it in front of clients. The agent RPS is leaning more towards kind of standardizing and understanding and like figuring out how our technicians are performing. That one's much more complicated because what it's doing is it's looking at the technician and it's specifically looking at their empathy, their communication, speed, the de-escalation. So it's taking into account the back and forth and not just the literal words they chose, which matters, right? This is how you find out, in brief, whether a technician is going above and beyond, whether they're doing the bare minimum. And again, it's not necessarily a tool to reprimand people. It's something to figure out if you are having wildly different support experiences across different technicians. 7.4, pretty good score. Not too bad at all. I get a lot of questions. I don't know if they're coming up yet. I'll save it for a moment when I'm finished with this. Whether you can customize how we look at stuff, not today. And I'll show you we have stuff that is locked in that we look for, but we have plans to make this more openable so you can kind of set your own standards of what you care about, right? Maybe you care about a technician doing X, Y, and Z on every ticket. That's not possible to check for nowadays. It should be in a update coming soon, but that's the gist. Lastly, user RPS, completely out of your hands, similar to agent RPS or technician RPS. That is just basically saying how are the users you're supporting behaving. Different ways to interpret this stuff, right? High ticket RPS means really good notes typically. High agent RPS means very good back and forth, very good bedside manner, if you will. And high user RPS is interesting because that means that users are basically happy, they want to play ball, they're nice, and they're basically having good conversations. Low user RPS and high agents, which I see a lot, basically means that your technicians are doing a good job of being polite and you're dealing with kind of some not so friendly end users. So there's interesting ways to interpret this when we get into reporting as a whole. I'm going to pause there because I covered all of triage and just scratch the surface with RPS. Anything I should answer for right now, Crystal, or should I keep chugging?
Well, you've done a great job explaining all of it. So it looks like we only have one question. So can the system analyze properly the context of a ticket that comes in a different language other than English?
Yes, it can. In fact, I have some people that are using it right now. CloudRadial services a lot of like North America because we're based in the US. And a lot of times we get a lot of like Canadians, especially like French Canadians that need to kind of work in both languages. But as long as the ticket comes in, right, the AI interpreting it can kind of do whatever. So it can interpret any language. And the one I've seen for sure work is French and Dutch. And did I see another one? I might have seen some German, but either way, as long as it reaches any part of the AI, it can understand basically anything, maybe even Sumerian. I'm not sure, I haven't tested, but pretty good. So for sure. And we can look at an example of that as well as I can prove it. You don't just have to take my word for it. That's the gist of RPS. So what you're going to find is you hook up data, you're so excited, you want to see where you're at, and you're going to get hit with a big fat benchmark first thing. And that's a good thing because you want to figure out where you're at. Again, it's not a tool to start spanking people and going, no, you need to have high RPS because frankly, MSPs didn't really prepare for this. I mean, you couldn't have, right? There's no guide 10 years ago saying you need to start getting your data looking like this for AI ingestion and AI assistance. This is where you start. And maybe I shouldn't be saying this on a webinar that is for marketing this thing. This is the worst you're ever going to see it because what you're doing is you're basically analyzing how things are going right now. Maybe you've been really good. Maybe you've been prepping for this and you want a pat on the back and this shows it. Cool. Most of the time, what happens is MSPs lock this in and then they go, ooh, we got some work to do to make sure this is actually ready for prime time. And that's kind of shifting us to phase two. What is that work? What do you do with it after it tells you you have a 6.4? Well, again, I'll dive a little bit deeper into the building blocks and then we'll zoom out to the other stuff. So, the building blocks, especially from tickets, this is what that big aggregated score is. Now, in my own example here on my database, I've got a bunch of scratch outs. Because, like I mentioned before, one of the things you can do, I'll briefly mention this, not so much strategy, is you can exclude a lot of stuff. So if you don't want to have things being scored, whether it's Backupify or Ninja One or Test or Urgent, whatever, you can make sure that it doesn't pollute your stuff. Ideally, you would do that by just not bringing it in, but who has the perfect clean PSA? I've yet to find somebody that has everything working perfectly. A lot of times, tickets that don't really matter make its way in here, and you don't want that messing with your scores. So if you look at my ticket grid and you're wondering why I have red strikeouts all over the place, it's because there's stuff in here that I don't really want it to learn. And if you notice what happens too when I click on, well, let's do this random QBR report, is it will acknowledge that that ticket exists and just won't factor that into scoring. So we do want to have this thing where we're kind of keeping tabs on the database because we are syncing every day. Every day we're going to pull in the tickets and the changes and make sure that your database is up to date so your AI learns the most up to date stuff. But I'm not going to bother scoring and everything else and learning from something you told me to ignore. So you'll see this if you start really getting into it. But let's look at a real one because we have a bunch of crap that unfortunately made its way in here. I need to clean that out. But let's look at a real one. So let's look at password reset needed. Great. Now, this is the stuff that I want you just generally understanding is that yes, it pulls in the stuff and it pulls in the ticket details, whatever. The reality is we care about these because this is one of the scores that contributes to the overall score. This is in regards to an individual ticket, how good are the notes? How good did the tech do? 10 out of 10. How good did the user respond? 10 out of 10. No notes, right? And it gives you some of the gist, right? Especially this is not super helpful for tickets that are like 3 lines long. It is helpful for those 50-line changes or chains that say like what happened here, and it goes, hey, in this case, before we even look at it, somebody requested a password, they expressed urgency, they got prompt assistance, things look pretty good. And a couple of other little key things that are going to factor into reports, which we'll look at. And then what's going to happen is we can see the specific of what's happening. We can see the back and forth that actually happened. This is pulled from the internal, I'm sorry, the public nodes. You can also pull in some internal notes to further train it and learn, especially if your techs are putting what they're doing in the internal notes. But in general, we see this conversation, seems happy, seems good. We're good to go. Now, what's going to end up happening is this is going to attribute positive points to, in this case, our technician is Marcus Rashford. Awesome. Another thing that we're big on, again, I won't harp the whole webinar about it, is PII, because there's a lot of concerns that you should be asking and be thinking about of how does this tool factor in sensitive information? A lot of times tickets have that. Well, the goal is to try to learn from it and learn the processes and learn the plays of how to resolve stuff. I don't necessarily need Craig's email address or Craig's phone number. I don't want my AI learning my individual customer's stuff because that's A, not relevant, and B, probably a compliance fine at some point when we actually have AI auditors. So this is the stuff we're heading off at the pass, redacting stuff that is PII that is irrelevant to the ticket because it doesn't matter. So you might see this when you hook it up, and you'll definitely see it when you look over my shoulder on the webinar. Irrespective. This is the same concept that applies to pretty much everything. So I could look at any one of those tickets and it's going to be the same exact stuff, right? Is this ticket good, bad? This ticket's terrible. Why is this ticket terrible? Well, because there's only one note that says hot. What am I going to do with that? Did this ticket necessarily suck? No, but it's certainly crappy food. So you can kind of see the idea that it goes, well, there's not much to do here. So this is a bad ticket from an AI perspective, specifically. That's how I'm going to frame it. And that is what kind of takes place with the overview, right? So a lot of the overview stuff you're seeing is the all that stuff come together. Now, a couple other quick things. This is where I'm going to go kind of quick, so forgive me. I'm doing this on purpose. I promise I'm not just being a tease. How you do reporting is ultimately up to you. I get this question a lot because you've got this big database built of all these cool tickets. Okay, what do you want me to do with it? Do you want me to just look at a 6.4? Awesome. No. What we want you to do with it is to try to figure out what is the cause of that 6.4. Again, if the goal is to try to use this in a positive way to both help technicians today and hopefully help your clients get better answers tomorrow, then what we need to do is figure out the root causes of why the scores are what they are, not just we need you to get to an 8.0. Why are we low? Well, how do we even answer that? Well, one of the first things that people use a lot is they look at like the tickets to review. And one of the things that happens, it's going to be kind of lame because again, my tickets are fake and I don't have that many. But in an actual MSP's case, you guys can fill in the blanks for yourselves. If you do any kind of assistance or you kind of want to do a taste test and you want to see if tickets are going well, you don't have time to check every single ticket that your techs are doing. That's a lot of tickets. That's a lot of time that you have to investigate to figure out coaching opportunities or whatever. So one of the things that ServiceAI does for you right on the dashboard is it highlights tickets that merit your attention. Usually I recommend doing it either on a daily or weekly cycle. Or if I put the filter for a week, I don't think I have much data, so I'm going to keep mine all the time. Yeah, I only have one. It'll basically flag stuff that is worth your time to review, right? There may have been 50 tickets, but the one that came up was, hey, this PC on fire is the only ticket to review this week. Why? Well, there's various labels, and I'll switch back to my all time because I have more. There's things like cancellation risks, right? Did the user that you're supporting imply or outwardly say that they want to cancel? There's some kind of a churn. That's important for compliance. That might be an account save. These are things that your average technician, it's not that they don't care, but that's not their job. Their job is to fix and close tickets. And a lot of times technicians get tunnel vision. They're just worried about hitting SLA and closing stuff and getting their billables all right, which is great. But sometimes you miss the forest for the trees. Sometimes you miss the warning signs, but the AI is watching for those things. So it's tagging stuff as like, hey, this was a cancellation risk. Maybe it's fine, maybe you know about it, but either way, it's highlighted for something to review. Flagged customers, stuff like this basically says like maybe the CSAT predicted CSAT, this is the AI stuff, wasn't super great. Maybe there was some reason to look at it. Could be that there was a disgruntled technician, right? The answer wasn't that great. It doesn't necessarily mean this is a on fire ticket. It just means, hey, something could have gone better here. Even down to complicated tickets, which are like require multiple touches by a lot of different technicians. Not saying that's a problem, just saying that this was like the heavy hitters for the week. And then even sales opportunities, right? Maybe somebody is asking for new hardware or an upsell, whatever. Again, a technician might not, it's not that they don't recognize that, but that's not their job. It's not their priority. So they miss somebody saying, I wonder if we should get a new server. And then they go, I don't know, yours is working. Goodbye, close ticket. Catch that, work on that, maybe explore new revenue opportunities. So this is the easiest way to at least understand what is worth looking at. And this is the thing that AI is really good at, is looking at the greater context of the conversation and flagging what deserves your attention. Now, if you want these scores to be higher and higher, the better they are, the more useful they are again for techs and end users. So you can start looking at stuff like technician reports. And again, I'm going to breeze through a lot of these things. So technician reports, I always use Tevin as my example, can look at an individual technician and go, what's his average note quality? What's his average performance? What's his average users that he deals with? Now, in this case, we're looking at Tevin. This is my go-to classic example of a guy who's trying his damn best and he's dealing with users that are not so nice to him. So you start to uncover things like maybe your own techs are going to churn because they're tired of being beat up. And you can prove that they are being beat up because you can start to see that they deal with people that are not super nice. If their agent RPS is super low, you can tell that they're probably a little bit gruff. Maybe they're too direct. Maybe they're not being very nice. Again, that's not that they're not doing tickets, but something to look out for. And you can see the insights on the specific technician. You can see performance reports on the average technician as well, meaning that this is kind of the breakdown of what that agent RPS is, where you can start to see how we're scoring them, why we're scoring them. Why did Tevin get a 8 out of 10 in communication or 7 out of asking the right questions, and start to break down going, well, this week he did it because he had this ticket that went really well or poorly, whatever. So it's kind of just giving you the best of the stuff directly in here. You can do that for a technician. You can do that for companies, which this is really useful if you're kind of what's the term I want to use? Blending VCIO stuff with service desk. So a lot of times the VCIO or kind of account managery stuff happens, but it happens maybe not in a vacuum necessarily, but kind of different from service. So a lot of times service, when they go to QBRs, they're worried about like what's our SLA rate, what's our CSATs, how many tickets did we open or close, which is fine. But some of the benefits that you have with Service AI is if you look at, like, I'm going to pick Apex Construction Services, you can see at a glance what they dealt with, right? So this is the issues and same thing, right? How are their tickets, the note quality of the tickets relating to them? Have the technicians given them a pretty good experience? Are their users happy? Seeing their recent tickets in a flash, seeing their users and seeing if they have any trouble users in a flash as well. But really interestingly is we can look at like an AI analysis of this customer. And in this case, you can actually see if there's like root causes or just generally, are they suffering from something in a time frame? So maybe it's all time or last month or this month. So is this a QBR report? Not really. It's a component of it, which I think is more interesting to a lot of techs and to a lot of points of contact because instead of talking about SLAs and tickets in and out, which are still important, you can start to make clear to them going like, hey, this week we had 17 tickets on Cisco AnyConnect. So was there an outage? Is there an opportunity to switch to a thing, a different platform? Is that just, par for the course? Down to like, okay, what is the root cause of this stuff? Or even how do we classify these things? Is the trend going up or down? So trend analysis is really interesting because what we're ultimately trying to do is not just tell you your techs are a 7 out of 10, make them go better, put better notes in. We're trying to tell you, well, you've got that aspect of it. You've also got the what is this company dealing with specifically? Is this something that we can get ahead of? Is this just the nature of supporting this customer? And then you can get that not only for the individual customer, but also for the entire service desk. So the point for us was to not only develop a tool that would build this big database and help coach people, but also give you an idea of what is productive to work on. So again, coaching one technician on putting better notes is good. Getting an idea of what root causes you're dealing with or what are the things that you should be focusing on to basically make your service desk more efficient is more interesting because then I switched to a different display where I'm looking at all kinds of stuff. If I see 5 password issues across different clients, right? In this case, I'm seeing them forgotten password or email not syncing that requires a password across all different kinds of stuff. I can start to visualize and really say, hey, we have so much noise here. I should implement something that can do it. And that trend analysis shows you that after you implement, you should see that downward trend. Kind of interesting stuff at the service desk level as well. So these are things that you can start to do and visualize once you have that firm grasp of what's happening. So this is and this is a very high level gist of where the reporting goes. The reporting can be anything from, do you want to help coach people and you really want to focus on their performance? Cool, we can do that. Do you want to focus on a customer's insights? Do you want to focus on the service desk and so on? That's a big part of it. Okay, I'm going to get into the technician assistance because I am flying here. Anything I should look at or answer right now, Crystal, or am I good to go for now?
No, I think you're good to go.
Awesome. So we've looked at 2 use cases of the 3 that I generally bundle. Triage, you can kind of see why I'm like triage is kind of whatever. It's not that it's not a good feature or anything, but this is the bigger picture of Service AI is the readiness, understanding, kind of visibility in a more holistic way. But what people really come to us for is tech assistance. So what we're doing is we built that big database, like I talked about with all your tickets. Now, when we actually weaponize it and use it, this is how it works. I can use this AI chat sandbox inside of Service AI. And what this is doing is it's leveraging, again, your documentation and your tickets to try to show you how the AI would answer them, right? So again, better food, better answers. Worse food, you're going to start seeing hallucinations. You're going to start seeing things that are not quite right or vague. You'll see an example. So I happen to know we've put in so many fake Outlook tickets. This thing should be a pro on Outlook in every single way. So my go-to example for webinars is like, my Outlook isn't working. And I'll even be nice and I'll say like, it's stuck in safe mode. Why do I do that? Because I give it something a little bit more contextual and not just like, hey, Outlook's not working. Now, as we look at this, what's happening is in an actual PSA scenario, you could feed it a specific ticket and it would actually look at the ticket, get all the context, and go, here's what I think is wrong with it. You can use it like I use it for webinars, which is you just punch in questions. And what I'm really doing here is I'm basically flavor checking, right, what its answer is with all the food I've given it. So it's going to answer me in this agent mode. And agent mode basically means it is not talking to the end user. It knows that I am a technician and it's going, hey, from one technician to another, here's my estimation. So this isn't necessarily a prompt that an end user necessarily might pipe in. This is almost simulating like an end user put this in. I'm Ricky, the technician. What would AI say? This is why it's called the sandbox. So it's going to look for related tickets. It's going to look for related articles. It's going to check itself. It's going to apply rules you've applied to the set. We haven't talked about rules yet, but whatever. And it basically goes, all right, let's work through it together. Here's what I would do to troubleshoot it, right? Boom, 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 boom. Let's do this. If none of these work, we can look at additional things. So at this point, I can treat it more like ChatGPT. It just knows stuff ahead of time. Instead of a generic AI model that you have to give it context, this thing already has the context. So it gives you the first step. Where does it get these answers? Well, it's synthesized a lot of this stuff based off of the related tickets that you've fed it and also related documentation, which is great because now you know that it's not pulling this stuff out of its butt or finding a random source online. This thing does do web search. Let me be clear. It's not like it won't do that, but it's specifically trying to figure it out. So This is the gist. And it comes back and it self-rates itself and it goes, hey, I've seen this a lot. In this case, you can see what I was talking about with my crappy fake tickets because they're called the same thing. They have more or less the same stuff. But I happen to know that I've dealt with that safe mode issue a whole bunch. One of the benefits to, again, my de facto favorites of Autotask and ConnectWise is you can do that in a pod or insights inside of the PSA. If the other ones are available, I'm happy to do it. I don't think they are, unfortunately. So for other PSAs, you just punch in the numbers and it does the same thing that I'm about to show you. In Autotask or ConnectWise, when I open up a ticket, and I will do so, what it's going to do is it's going to, I wonder if there's a ticket I have not clicked on. Let's see, Microsoft Office issues, maybe. It's going to load me up and it's going to let me in and it's going to basically punch in the responses directly there. The benefit being you are ostensibly giving your technicians the head start AI that has the context in there, which is cool because they can ask it stuff and whatnot, which is really helpful for your lower tier technicians, especially tier ones that are not super sure. They don't know how many tickets this has touched. They don't know where to go find the answers. It gives them a synthesized answer. As you get higher and higher in the technician chain, it becomes less and less useful to just troubleshoot stuff like this because, again, your tier two, tier three technicians, they don't need AI telling them how to troubleshoot Outlook. They probably know. But one of the things that's really useful for them is they can ask it questions about the tickets, the types, the company, and it will know that context. Same thing with looking at like their summary of how the ticket's going if they need a quick catch up, especially for super long tickets. This is the exact same thing as doing it in the sandbox. It's just in the comfort of doing it within the PSA and even seeing the related tickets. So again, in the comfort of the PSA, they can see all the same exact stuff, right? I showed you in here, here's the related tickets. I showed you in here, here's the related tickets and articles and whatnot, and they can jump to them. So it's like a quick reference to here's the most relevant stuff. So in this case, this is why garbage in, garbage out, right? If you feed it good stuff and you feed it good notes and you have good processes, it's going to give them back tenfold really fast to the technicians. They can hopefully resolve the questions quickly and they can go and talk to it and they can get the best assistance possible. Again, that's the only favoritism that Autotask and ConnectWise get is they get the thing popped into there. Same exact functionality. There's no real loss or gain. It's just comfort of not having to jump back and forth or to screen your PSA with ServiceAI. Now, what happens? I'll do a couple of fun examples. What happens if I ask it something that I know it has no context on? How does that factor in? Well, let me ask it, how do I create a new character in World of Warcraft? Now, you could put a rule in here saying, don't even bother answering non-IT stuff, but we're just going to see what happens. So I'm going to bet that I have no tickets relating to World of Warcraft. Maybe it'll be like creating and it'll come up with some really, really low. Oh, somebody put an Overwatch 2 ticket in to surprise me. Blizzard, I guess. Anyways, it's trying to figure out the correlation. So it goes, hey, I have nothing on this. I'm telling you guys. So what it did was it still gave me an answer and gave me a thing kind of generic, like it's probably correct, but it's not super, super sure. So it came back going like, I don't really have much context on this. Here you go. Now, in theory, this is how you enrich it. How do you get tickets like this? I gave a dumb example of World of Warcraft, but it could be something very serious for your business, right? Somebody's dealing with, I happen to know some tax software stuff. So if you're dealing with tax software and somebody goes, oh, my UltraTax or my Lacert or something like that, my dental software is not working, you have no context on that. Your techs have never done it. You may not have documentation on it. It's going to give you a similar thing where it's going to go, I don't know, log in, hit settings, and hit go. It's not quite a hallucination, but it's probably a really vague thing that's not super helpful. It's an example of not great, not very nice for the technician, not prime time ready for the user. So in this case, you have two options to improve the AI. People ask me all the time, how do I get that RPS score up? How do I improve the AI so it doesn't give me crappy answers or so-so answers? There's only two ways to improve this thing. It learns off of your notes. So the reality is it's not so much like you have to sit there and train it. It's you have to do your best job of putting in the right answers and being thorough, knowing that what you're putting in those notes is going to be what it is going to feed on. So in this case, if I were doing that World of Warcraft example, it gives me a crappy answer. I go, forget about that. I'm going to put in a really good note the same way that I usually do stuff. I can still treat this like ChatGPT. I can still ask it and work through and get a good answer back. But the only thing it's going to learn on is what makes it into the discussion, which means that if you run into a ticket like I just did, it's not great. You put a really banger of a note in there. That ticket RPS is high, and the next time that comes up, it goes, I got it. I have this ticket to reference. So it's a way to basically build the foundation to get better answers and to also know people ask me, like, is this a problem? If I see a crappy answer, is that a problem? It's not a problem. It's an indicator that you have no context. It's a gap. You've found a gap. And that's it tells you big by saying, like, I'm not super sure. I looked at the web, not super sure. So that's one way. You put better notes. Why that's my preferred way is because it doesn't take you out of your workflow. Your techs just put better notes in. They do the same research they would have done even if ServiceAI had never existed, and it's fine. It'll keep going. The other thing that you can do, which is a big, it's like the nuclear option, is if I don't have time to do that, I don't have time to go learn all the intricacies of how to do Ultratax or Lacert or Dental Software or World of Warcraft. This is where we talk about AI article generation being a helper. You can see here where it goes, you know what? I'm missing insight. Again, I'll wait for you to put a note, or you can ask me, the AI, to go find the answers. Now, by doing this, what you're actually doing is you're asking the AI to go out, find the instructions, and build myself an article based off of stuff. Now, this is a dumb example because I don't have any other World of Warcraft tickets, but in an example where it was like Lacert, which is again a tax software, or Yardi, which is an accounting software, something like that. How do I do that? Well, what it does is it tries to find any ticket in the system that is related to that, going like, okay, somebody asked one of those questions here, somebody mentioned something about that here. It's doing what a human being wishes they could do, which is having all the context at once, going, oh, 6 months ago, we had a ticket on this. I should include some of that troubleshooting into this, so I build a nice comprehensive doc. And then it also goes, if you have additional documentation that is kind of scattered, you mentioned one thing on how to troubleshoot something in one document and another in another, this thing is going to pull it all together. You can also do source URLs to further enrich it. So in an actual use case and not World of Warcraft, you could point it to the KB or whatever of the actual thing you're supporting. So you could say like, oh, you know what? Again, we use even Outlook, right? There's a whole bunch of support articles on how to use Outlook. Crawl those for answers and write it that way. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to generate an article and just wait for it to come back and research and put it together. So what I'm hoping to show is that it is not going to just cursorily, that's not even a word, look at the answers and put together the document. What it's going to do is now it's going to specifically go check and give itself context going, oh, you need the battle.net launcher. Okay, cool. You need to choose your game mode. That's true, right? There's multiple types of World of Warcraft. So what it did here is it gave itself all the context it needs to answer this question. Fundamentally, this is not touching the client. It basically built itself a little bit extra juice. Now, just because I'm a nerd, I happen to know it didn't finish it perfectly, right? There's more than just orc and undead in World of Warcraft. So I could put in other stuff, Tauren, whatever. You can enrich it, you can modify, you can do whatever. Why do I bring this up? Well, again, it gives you a pretty good first pass. You can obviously modify and do whatever. I'm going to add it to the KB. Why I do this is because I'm adding it to the internal brain context bump. Now, what I've done by doing this is I have now given it a severe advantage over my generic, how do I create a new character? So if I rerun this prompt, what I've essentially simulated is what if I were to give it more context, feed it better stuff, and try again? Is the answer going to be better? Is it going to be more useful? Let's see. Instead of just saying log in and try stuff, now it knows the launcher and what to do and how to do it. So if I say, again, I think it was how to create a character in World of Warcraft, it should come back pretty good going, hey, we have a pretty good article all about that. So now it's much more thorough, right? You want to do this, you want to do that, you want to help with this. And as I ask it questions, it has that additional context. This is the basis of improving the AI. People ask me that all the time. How do I improve the AI? There's no such thing as improving the AI because the AI is you. You're feeding it. So what food do you want to put in? Put in better notes, you're improving the AI. Giving it articles that it is assisting in feeding, it's improving the AI. The purpose of this, and we're going to tie it all back together, is when you start looking at RPS scores from when you first start with Service AI versus 6 months or a couple weeks down the road, what you ultimately want to see is these scores go up. You also want to see, like, say, let's do the AI training. You want to be able to see holistically, like, hey, we've got this pushed out a whole bunch of times. Out of the 159 chats, well, actually, out of the 597 chats we've had, 26% of them were bangers. Perfect. They knew all the context and everything else. 71% of them were, we have some stuff, and 12 were just complete failures. 2% of chats were nothing. This is going to speak to my last bit of how this ends up going to end users. We have a product called CloudRadial Chat. As of right now, those two are not connected, but we're building the connection to them. That connection is basically going to take all of the information, all of the context, and feed it to our chat to make it way smarter. The short-term stuff is you get to see whether that's a big mistake or not, right? If it can't handle your own technicians asking it stuff with plenty of context, you're going to have a really bad experience for clients. So this is how you can kind of benchmark whether you are comfortable or whether you want to put it in front of clients. And I'll do like the last 7 days, this is all time. You start to see the bump, right? Because I've done better. I've given it better context. So I'm working towards it. You start to see that if your technicians are putting in better tickets, the chats get better, whatever, you have an AI ready tool that you are then able to put in front of clients in some form or fashion, right? So this is the game of feeding it, testing it, training it, and then deploying it. But right now, we're really focused on seeing where you're at, benchmarking, and moving forward. This is the gist of ServiceAI. So whether you're doing triage stuff to get into it, to kind of move the needle, whether you're working with your technicians to see how it responds, again, it is both a tool to help the techs answer it, but it's also a tool for them to figure out whether that answer is acceptable to an end user or not. So it's not just, can I use this or not? It's, do I want this to be the answer that my users get? That's the idea. Okay, I've left, oh my God, 3 minutes. Wow, I did pretty good, Crystal. What can I help with or answer?
You did do very good. There are some questions in here, so let's see what we can answer. So, what does the AI do in the case of having external documentation outside of the ITSM?
By ITSM, I'm going to guess they mean just outside of the system. Let's see. In general, how documentation works, and I'll cover this briefly. So we have supported ones that we pull in directly in here. IT Glue and Hoodoo are super popular. We pull in from CloudRadial, but what happens if you have stuff from the other sources? Right now, I don't have any way to import stuff in from anywhere else. Like there's no like connect to SharePoint, connect whatever, or import in. There may be though, because even with IT Glue, what we did was we added an option to import in the export files because at the end of the day, we don't really care where the information comes from. It's not like we're married to IT Glue or Hoodoo because we need to have information from them. So if it's outside of that for now, I don't have a good answer. Hopefully, at some point, I can push my developers to push in some kind of importable format. If it is in those files, it's going to pull in and give the context. So that's the gist. And again, that's just a further part of enriching it. And the other thing you could do is if you have one of the supported PSAs, a good workaround, because I've actually come into this a few times, is we do have the potential of pulling in documentation, not just from third-party systems, but also the PSA. And a lot of times nobody really uses the, ConnectWise knowledge base because there's better ones out there. But you can import stuff into that and we can pull that in. So there's always ways to bounce around stuff in general to give it further context. What else we got?
Okay. I think both the other questions in here are about Hoodoo. To
Mhm.
clarify that ITSM was his ConnectWise as our ITSM and documentation is hosted in Hoodoo. So I
Hmm.
think you can do
Perfect. That would
that.
be good because we have a direct connection. And then I don't think I have a good example in this one. I mean, Hoodoo would work the same way. What happens is when you have a document, this is a pretty important one actually. I have this source column, right? You can see that there's ones that I create myself. There's ones that come from, in this case, I have CloudRadial, the portal, being a source of documentation. I have ones from IT Glue. Imagine this was Hoodoo. So not only do we pull it in, the other thing that's super key and critical for answering stuff is those that are pulled in from sources that are not just written generically can be tied to companies. A lot of times you do have that. Hoodoo, maybe you have an article specifically on how to troubleshoot whatever for this one client. Not only do we pull that in, we keep that association, meaning that that information is not going to be used for troubleshooting other people, only for that company. So when I go into, for example, this random how to create an app password, this is only relevant for digital efforts, which means that when I go into digital efforts in here or in the pod or whatever, when I'm working the ticket, when I do the AI chat, I can do it impersonating them, which is going to both let me use the generic stuff and unlock me using the specific stuff to them. We've thought through how to kind of keep that correlation locked in.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so here's a question for you. So is a primary Cloud Radio product integral to using Cloud Radio Service AI?
No, not really. We've actually developed them so that they're independent because for our sake, we have the climate, and for everyone else wondering, like the primary product of CloudRadial, mostly in the sense that it's the flagship that we've had the longest, is the portal. And the portal can live independently because the portal at the end of the day is a place where people log in and do tickets, do a QBR, get to their day-to-day stuff. What ServiceAI's job is to do is to sit at the service desk layer, which is related but separate, and basically get insights. Now, short term, where we are right now, those three don't talk to each other. My primary things that I have CloudRadial working on, I have a chat tool that can be in the portal or not, just exists as a standalone chat. I have the portal that can integrate with chat or ServiceAI, which we'll talk about, but it doesn't, and ServiceAI, which could feed to both. So we tried to make it so you could buy any one of those independently and be fine. But obviously, we have all the benefits of trying to put it together. So our big goal, and this is what we work on, is this is our newest product by kind of a long shot. So what we want to do is we want to be able to build Service AI to give all the context to chat to make smarter chat. And then even when it hooks up, so let's say you don't do that and you hook up directly to the portal, which is what a lot of people want to do, what that's going to do is it's going to unlock a whole slew of information because then it starts to unlock not just how to troubleshoot stuff with their documents, but it's going to start going, what reports do they have available? What do they click on? What do they log into? So it starts to be able to feed in insights and also output. So when I go and have a chat, this is the vision and I say like, oh, somebody put in a ticket about Outlook not working. Yeah, I could say, here's the fix or whatever, but I could also go, hey, they have access to the portal and they have a course available to them on how to use Outlook. Maybe we should point them there. So what hooking Service AI up into the portal is going to do for us, this is what we're building out and sketching everything, is it unlocks far more resources than just chats or links to stuff or just documentation. It's going to go, you got this report, you got this assessment, you got this whatever. That's going to be the linkage for those two. All three together means that, again, Service AI is being the kind of intelligence brain, feeds better chats. Chats can be embedded into the portal, which means we have auto authentication. We know who we're talking to. And again, we have omni resource availability into it. So designed to work completely separately, but obviously better together. But again, to be clear to everybody, those connections don't exist. Service AI is now getting to the point where it's mature enough that we know the use cases, we know how people want to use it. And now what we're building, like literally as we speak, are those interconnections and how they kind of enrich each other. Long answer, but that's the goal.
That was a great answer. I don't see any other questions coming in. But if there is some we didn't get to, we will try to get them to you as soon as possible. So yeah.
Sweet. I'm already late for another call, so I should probably bounce, but I want to say thank you guys. I appreciate your time. And if you have more questions, like Crystal said, please let us know. And I look forward to seeing you trying it out. Bye, guys. Have a good rest of your day.